Good morning. Thank you for being here today. And it's a pleasure and it's an honor again to have an event organized by our dear colleague and friend of the Observatory, Maria Luisa Parra, a Harvard professor, who's really helpful, really active and dynamic with our activities. And all the seminars and workshops she organizes are always really interesting, very relevant to our purposes. And so we have to thank her once more for organizing this really interesting workshop and with Florence Henshaw. And so Maria Luisa is going to introduce our guest speaker today. I hope you will enjoy it and find it enriching. Thank you.
Gracias, Marta. Bueno, buenos días. Asumo que todos hablamos español, but I'm going to make the presentation in English for the sake of the video that we are doing. But thank you all for being here. Thank you to the Observatorio Cervantes always for supporting these activities. Marta Mateo, Maria Lain, Victoria Whitney, which organized, the event, traveling, nice break that we'll have, and as always. So it's my pleasure to introduce you today to Dr. Florencia Henshaw. She has a PhD in second language acquisition and teacher education from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where she is now the Director of Advanced Spanish and the Director of the Center for Language Instruction and Coordination. She is a certified OPI ACTFL, a tester in Spanish, as well as a certified rater for the ACTFL Assessment of Performance Toward Proficiency in Languages. She is a 2018 recipient of the Excellence in Language Instruction Award within the School of Literature, Cultures, and Linguistics, and the author of 2 Spanish textbooks, one for grammar review courses and one for composition courses. She has designed 6 online courses, including Spanish composition for heritage learners, and she has extensive experience with technology integration into the language curriculum, and that's why I was so pleased that she was able to come and share with us some of her expertise in this topic that I know it's very interesting and important these days. So without further delay, I give you the microphone.
I have one. I think we're all set.
Is anybody here that does not speak Spanish? Because we can go back and forward. Podemos hacerlo bilingüe. Bienvenida y gracias, Florencia.
Okay, gracias. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming on a Saturday morning. And thank you so much to Maria Luisa and El Observatorio for their kind invitation. I am absolutely honored to be here at Harvard. So, as Maria Luisa said, I've done a lot of technology integration, ranging from using it in some projects to fully online courses. And at Illinois, we do have a relatively healthy population of heritage learners. We are not in Chicago. We are 2.5 hours south of Chicago. So we don't have as big a population as Chicago does, but we do have heritage language learners of Spanish. And so that prompted the need to create this online course for heritage language learners. In today's workshop, though, I'm going to be focusing on technology integration for heritage learners more in general. So not just for fully online courses, but just for any kind of courses. Some of the best practices, perhaps, that we'll discuss are more applicable for fully online courses. But my goal is that no matter what your approach is, so whether you just teach face-to-face 5 days a week or whether you do teach online, that you can at least get some ideas of tools and projects and ways that you can incorporate technology. So we are going to start by discussing some of the pros and cons of technology and then outlining some best practices, both about technology integration in general, but also more specifically for heritage language instruction. Then I have a lot of tools and ideas to share with you. And the way that I like to do workshops is to make it very interactive. I like hearing from you throughout the workshop. So it's not like I'm going to talk and then you ask. This is all collaboration here. And so my own experience going to technology workshops is that you can get very overwhelmed by all of the tools and ideas that the presenter is sharing. You might be loving it, but at some point you're like, I can't remember what that was for. So I can stop at any time, and I also did it more as a learn, pair, share. So I'm going to show you a few tools and ideas, then we'll stop. I'll ask you, what do you think? And I'll give you a couple minutes with your classmates. You can share, right, in your pairs, right? What do you think? You can, take down notes, and then you tell me, right, which of the tools so far of that particular segment, what did you think about? What would you use them for, etc. And then at the very, very last part of the workshop, I'll give you time to create more of a complete project or a task. It doesn't have to be a big one-semester project. It could just be an activity, but something concrete that would be applicable for the courses you teach, or for the course. Could be one specific course. Something more concrete, not just, I want to use the tool, but rather, what would it look like exactly in your classroom? Okay. So if you have questions at any point, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and stop and ask me in Spanish or English. So the first thing to ask you is to get to know you a little bit better. Where are you on this technology proficiency scale? So ranging from a technophobe, right? You don't like technology at all, to a technophile, absolutely addicted and know everything about technology, beginner, intermediate, advanced. Where are you? Intermediate? Everybody's intermediate.
Nobody wants to say hi. I'm an intermediate high.
Intermediate high! I love that.
I'm not a false beginner.
Advanced low. How about that?
I love that. Okay, so in general, do you teach fully online courses? Do you teach courses where you blend some technology within your courses, hybrid? Okay.
Or the blended.
Yes. Okay. And some of you just use some technology for some lessons or tasks?
No.
Nothing at all? Okay. YouTube. Okay, that counts. So, you might be thinking that, me giving this workshop, creating 6 online courses, that I am a technophile, but I'm actually not. My phone is not smart. I am probably I would say advanced, meaning I know a lot, but I'm just very selective and picky, right? I don't like to embrace technology for the sake of technology, right? Just because there's a platform out there and it looks cool, sometimes that's not the best way to go about completing that project. Or that's not exactly what you want the learners to be learning. And so you need to be careful with technology too. So we're going to do a little bit of brainstorming. What do you think are some ways in which technology might enhance heritage language instruction, not just language in general? And what do you think are some potential pitfalls? And there could be overlap in the sense of heritage learner and second language learners. Sometimes it could be pitfalls for both. Or sometimes it could be more specific for heritage language learners. So I'll give you a couple minutes if you want to talk to a new friend and brainstorm. What do you think are the affordances and pitfalls of technology? Okay, let's see what you have to say. I'd love to hear your ideas. Let's be positive. Let's start with some pros, affordances, good things about technology for heritage language instruction. What do you think? Yes.
Well, I went to a heritage language workshop last weekend at Barnard with Kim Kotowski.
Ooh.
And so it's great that I have these 2 in a row. And
Yeah.
one of the things she was talking about is if you wanted to create a heritage course in your intermediate level or your beginning level, and you only can offer it at one time, right?
Yes.
So if you took one out of your 12 sections
Yes.
and taught that as a heritage speaker course, then sometimes heritage speakers say, I can't fit that into my schedule.
Yes.
So if you can afford some flexibility, if you can have if it could be like a hybrid course, that's something I would like to develop as a hybrid course, so that maybe some of it would be in class and some of it would be online.
Absolutely. I wonder if Kim stole that from me. I'm kidding. But that's exactly the rationale, or one of the motivations behind us developing a fully online section for heritage learners. We had, as I was sharing yesterday, probably by now I would say a good cohort of 40 learners that can take the course. But are they all of these are busy college students? Are they all available Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 when we are able to offer it? Maybe not even half of them are. And so what do we do? Then the course gets canceled, right? And so we get caught into this cycle. And so for us, even hybrid could have been perhaps an issue because you still have to attach a time where they have to meet in the classroom. You know, if you have a lot of learners, you could still make it work, but you could still miss the chance to reach some of the learners that are not available. So fully online with no time date attached, no classroom attached, that attracted everybody because it didn't conflict with anything. You have to then be creative about how you can still incorporate some synchronous interaction. The way we do it with other online courses that we have is students form small groups. In the case of heritage learners, I think they could handle video chatting on their own without the instructor present all the time. If you have, already discussion questions set, things like that. Beginner L2 students, not so much. They cannot carry a conversation. They would be too intimidated to be video chatting. Heritage learners, they can probably handle it. And if you say you can use Spanglish if you want to, like something more casual, and they can still be discussing the readings or discussing a video or whatever it is. And then the video is recorded. So you as an instructor can then watch it. You can then give them feedback. You can then give them participation points, right? And there's not a one day attached to it. So greater flexibility, delivery modes, absolutely crucial for heritage language learners. Yes. Any other pros? Yes.
We were discussing that sometimes, or many times, heritage learners are the first time they're taking a class in Spanish, and the difference of the level is very significant because they never study. One of them knows how to use the past, the other one doesn't know how to use the article or whatever. So it's a better way to offer a more personalized teaching experience for each of them.
Absolutely, right. You're stealing all the ideas that I have in the next slide. Yes, that is exactly right. So technology allows us to be more flexible, right? Learners have more choices. You can set different things for different learners, right? So that's another way that the learner can control their own learning more. And in the case of heritage learners with such a wide difference in needs and abilities, that would be a very good, important pro. Anything else? Do we want to talk about cons? What are some potential pitfalls of technology? What could be some issues? Yes.
Accessibility.
Accessibility, yes.
Digital divide.
I'm sorry?
The digital divide.
The digital divide, right. So accessibility in the sense of affordability. So who can, have access or purchase the technology, have a computer or whatever device. Also accessibility in terms of disabilities, right? So some students, there are some sites, right? So they might need a site that works with screen readers, for example. Not all of them do, or some of right? So then you need to work on that, but that's something else that you need to keep in mind. Yes, that's definitely an issue. Different institutions obviously have different opportunities for different students, but I know in some institutions or even public schools, right, where it's hard to offer students the chance to have their own laptop or tablet. Some of them don't. I mean, even in a big university like UIUC, we have computer labs, but there's no program that lets the students have their own laptop if they cannot afford it, right? And so if the student wants to work at home, they can't, right? They have to go and use the computer lab on campus. So that's definitely something to think about. Anything else? Yes?
Obstacles to creating community. Okay, as something we have in a classroom.
Absolutely.
Not that it's impossible, but it's just there's more effort involved.
Yes, absolutely.
Because on the other hand, it's great for heritage learners to learn about their own cultures, but also to compare with cultures of other Hispanic, Latino, Latinx,
yes,
ascendencias.
Absolutely. So going back to his comment, it is more individualized, right? The learner is more in control, but at the same time we create this potential challenge of how do we create this community, right? In the classroom is easier. We're all together in one room, talking face to face and all this. Not impossible, just a little bit more challenging to create a sense of community in online courses. Yeah, I saw another hand, yes.
Yeah, it's just, this is for all students. It's the procrastinators, it's the ones who don't, who sort of, it's just they don't have a physical class, they don't have peer pressure, they won't do their work until maybe, a lot of prodding and maybe the last minute. It's so easy to let the online course go when you have a lot of
yes.
competing obligations.
Yes, online courses do require more time management skills, organization, being proactive. That's definitely true. Even if it's not an online course, even hybrid courses, right, where there's still a technology component, something they need to do outside the home, they could still, forget the deadlines or forget to do it, etc. Or even just procrastination in general, like leaving things to the last minute, and technology doesn't always work right the first time you use it. And so that sometimes requires them to be more proactive. Yes. Anything else? Am I missing any other comments? Yes.
Yeah, the major pitfall could be that the instructor
Doesn't know how to use it.
Oh, the instructor. Yes.
Yes.
Instructor forgets about
that's
it.
why
Instructor
I
training.
guess some of us
Yes.
are here,
Yes.
right?
Yes, absolutely, yes. We're all thinking about the learners, right? But what about the instructor? You're absolutely right. So if you're not too comfortable with technology, you try to incorporate it. And that's a key aspect of it. You cannot assign something to your students using XYZ tool and you have never tried it yourself. That's a recipe for disaster, pretty much. So you have to be comfortable with the tool yourself, try it out, and then you can assign it to the students. So if you're not comfortable with technology, that could be a pitfall. Okay, one more.
I would love to hear at some point today, if you might address this, is not only instructor sort of obstacles, but also administration obstacles, because in our Spanish department, I teach at Boston University, our Spanish department, we have a lot of people who are very excited to create online and hybrid courses, and we have some people in our College of Arts and Sciences, some deans, who think this is watered down education.
Oh,
And
right.
For those of us who know how great it can be, it sometimes can be hard to
Yes.
educate. I don't know if that fits into your talk today, but
Yes, I don't know that I have it in the workshop. We discussed it yesterday in the seminar about educating, right? Not just educating like teacher training, but educating other people, including the students or academic advisors, right? Who do have some negative perceptions of online courses in general. And that's because for the most part, they're thinking of those more old-fashioned online courses where all the students did was like click, 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 multiple choice questions, right? Very isolated, you didn't get it, you never heard from anybody, right? But a well-designed online course should not be like that, and then it could be very successful. So that's definitely important. Okay, so to recap, so some of the benefits we talked about, right? So this individualized learning, right? More autonomy, learner-directed learning, feedback, immediate, greater opportunities for meaningful communication in the target language. This could be for both, right? We didn't mention it before, but when you think about it, YouTube, right? Everything that you can access now online it just opens up a whole new world that wasn't possible before technology, or that was more challenging before technology. Access to authentic oral and written input. When you think about a lot of online content, yes, there are videos, but a lot of it is written. So for heritage language learners, that's something they actually need, right? They need more writing and more reading. And as we said, greater flexibility in delivery modes. In terms of the pitfalls, we talked about it, but for heritage learners, there aren't as many materials already available out there. Even if you look for sites to learn Spanish, it's always Spanish as a foreign language, right? There's not a whole lot of online stuff for heritage learners. Difficulty building a sense of community, we talked about that. The rigidity of computer-graded activities. This could be frustrating for both second and heritage language learners, right? So you get the question, you think that's the answer, or you type the answer and the computer tells you it's wrong. And it frustrates you because a lot of times language is fluid, right? Sometimes there could be another way of saying that, but the computer is expecting one correct answer. In the case of heritage learners, we have to think about what is this dichotomy of right and wrong sending, as a message to them, right? So if they typed in aiga, and all they get is wrong, it's like, wait a minute, but my mom says aiga, what do you mean that's wrong? Can we, as instructors, get feedback in the sense of, okay, let me tell you about aiga, right? It's an old form of Spanish. You can tell them the history, you can tell them how it is used, but it's a stigmatized variety, right? And what that means. And so there's a lot more that you do as the instructor that the computer's just going to tell them wrong. Yeah.
Can we, I teach a massive open online course through edX, and we're able to give them feedback.
Yes.
Right? So tell them why that's the wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Not
absolutely.
a bad word for for heritage speakers. It might be, this is formal language versus informal.
Right, so if you want to just frame it that way, absolutely. So if you create your own activities, right, and you can program what feedback you want them to get.
Yeah.
So you anticipate, some of them are going to type aiga. Let me write a nice message explaining what happened. Yeah. Yes, you could do it, right? You could personalize it. Absolutely. You have to be creative and crazy enough, like I am, to create your own activities and, tailor the feedback message and all that, and you might not have time to do that. So that sometimes is the issue with the computer-graded activities. And exposure to the unknown, right? You're sending your students out to cyberspace to look for things. Could there be inappropriate content? Sure. Could there be inappropriate comments if you ask them to publish something publicly? Yes. Alternative spelling. I added that there because we had a nice discussion yesterday about it. There was an article in 2008 expressing concerns. This was for Russian heritage learners, but it could be applicable to any language, that when people write things online, comments on Facebook, blog posts, etc., that they might not spell everything correctly. And that perhaps those, for this particular instructor who wrote this article, those are exactly the mistakes that we're trying to get them to overcome. So if it's an issue for you, so if you're truly concerned that they're going to encounter bad spelling out there, perhaps you do want to give them some guidance, right? It's my position that you shouldn't be telling them, don't look at those sites. To me, it's a disservice, right? Because if you tell them, don't use Facebook in Spanish, or don't go to that Facebook page in Spanish, because you're going to encounter a lot of spelling errors. But that's real language, right? Don't we want them to be motivated to keep seeing Spanish in their Facebook feed? I know they're not on Facebook anymore, but if they were on Facebook or Instagram, wherever they are right now.
Their families are.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah. A lot of students are saying Facebook es para los viejos. And I'm like, oh God, I'm already una vieja. So yeah, but wherever they are, right, in social media, Reddit, right, maybe they're on Reddit, and I'm sure there might be some typos in there too, or misspelled words. But to me, no, I want them to keep seeking things in Spanish and keep seeing Spanish and using Spanish. So instead of just shielding them all together and say, you can only read, La Nación from Argentina, right? It's just not their world, right? And so I think it's tricky to just tell them, only look at these sites, right? It's not going to feel real to them. So thinking of all these pitfalls and pros, let's outline some best practices. And this is one of my favorite quotes from Robert Blake. And it says, technology is theoretically and methodologically neutral. What does that mean? That means that you cannot say, oh, my teaching approach is to use technology. It's not a teaching approach. No. It's just a tool, right? And so you can apply any theory behind it to language learning and use technology. You can apply any method to language teaching and use technology. Could that be good? Could that be bad? Sure. You shouldn't blame the technology. You have to think about the pedagogy, right? Your method behind the teaching. So you have to lead with pedagogy rather than technology. Instead of saying, I really like this tool, I'm going to use this tool, without a clear plan as to what is the goal, what are they learning, right? It's just not going to work, right? You have to start always with what is your learning goal? What is the objective? What do you expect students to accomplish with this? And then you can see, okay, what kind of tools can I use to accomplish So let's do a little bit more of brainstorming. What are your goals for your learners? If you teach heritage learners, whether it is a course specific for heritage learners or you have a mixed class, thinking about these goals by Godry, Dukat, and Pochowski, what are your goals for your students? Let's talk about heritage learners, right, rather than second language learners in your class. So I'll give you a couple minutes and discuss with the partner. What do you want them to learn?
Right, so I call it, yeah, what I call it is what they're learning. When they ask that question, well, my mother said no. And instead of saying English is good, you're speaking class perspective, just like it's here. And everybody's class, right? So it is yeah, but I mean, it's still, that will be in Spanish.
Because it means that most of them are, they have literacy skills in English, right? Because they went to school in English, they know how to read and write in English. That maybe we can use some of that, so now they have literacy skills in the heritage language. A lot of our learners, for example, they already know how to read and write in Spanish and in college. I've talked to several teachers in elementary school or middle school, and the learners have no literacy skills in Spanish, right? So then how do we help them transfer that they can read in English, now they can read in Spanish? Yes. Right.
Right, and just then how it gets the idea of and she also talked about going to the beach, you go to a wedding.
All right, what are your goals? Share with me, what are your goals for your learners? It doesn't have to be from this list, right? This is just to give you ideas, but you love the list, okay. What are your goals? Yes?
We read something, we both work in twin high schools, if you will.
Okay.
We have heritage language courses since 2004, but it's always a new experience every time you teach it. So out of those 6, and a book that we mutually shared, which recommended you choose 3. We chose Spanish as an academic language, but at the end. Transfer of literacy, because one superpower that our students have is that they're translation warriors.
Yes.
You know, and they don't realize that they are. And then acquisition, no, sorry, not acquisition. What was the other one? I don't see, acquisition or development of cultural awareness. So an awareness of all the different, their countries, their traditions. So really rich in doing those, or creating an awareness of how different but the same. All of the people in the classroom are, but anyway, we focused on those 3 things. But
that's great.
We're still learning so much at the same time.
Yes, and it's hard. I mean, I like the idea of just pick 3. But sometimes that's hard too, right? And you don't have to accomplish all 7 or all 3 in one activity or in one lesson, right? This could be your goals over the course of maybe years, right? It's not something you're going to accomplish all in one semester. But yeah, and I mean, definitely the development of the academic skills, right? That tends to be pretty common in a lot of heritage language courses. And then development of cultural awareness, and I think that's where technology can help a lot too, right? But for all of those three. Any other goals, maybe slightly different, not necessarily in this list? Did anything speak to you? Yeah.
Well, I think one of my goals is, I've had heritage learners, I don't like that word, as you know, but I've had them in literature courses, and one of my goals is get them to talk without feeling stigmatized.
Yes.
Without feeling that, oh,
Yes.
I don't know about this. My grandmother says this, but I don't know. I don't think it's right.
Yes.
So, and not to knock whatever dialect or whatever form of Spanish that they speak, not to knock it. I encourage it, but I always tell them, well, this is the way it's said, let's say, in Spain, okay? But, you know, you say it another way, that's fine. And I try to point out that many of their, let's say, the lexicon is really authentic.
Sure.
I had them in my Don Quixote course, and I say, hey, you don't find enfadado in Don Quixote, you find enojado. And that's what you say in Spanish America, enojado.
Right.
Just as an example.
Oh, yeah.
So, trying to get them out of their shell because they feel that they speak some weird,
Absolutely.
you know, I think that's a goal that everybody should have.
Yes, I call it linguistic self-esteem, right? But it's this confidence, right, of just owning their variety. But it's also awareness. I'm not sure if it's, I mean, I don't know if it's perhaps related to this, perhaps the expansion of bilingual range, and that's more what they had in mind. But this idea of understanding, owning their own variety, but also understanding what the world thinks of that variety, and when they need to sort of code switch, not code switch between English and Spanish, but code switch to the other variety, depending on the context, depending on the interlocutor, but to also feel confident that even if you encounter an interlocutor that tells you that's wrong, that even happens to native speakers. I'm from Argentina. We say things that are probably different in Spain. I've encountered speakers from, nothing wrong with Spain, I'm just saying, the people that I interacted with, and that they might say things like, what are you saying? Like, that's just wrong. You say it this way, right? I still remember one that was, voy caminando a la escuela, and somebody from Spain told me, that's wrong. You say voy a pie. Okay, you could say it that way too. So it happens even to native speakers, but I'm obviously a native speaker, so I already feel confident about my language and how I talk, but you have to understand where they're coming from, right? And all of the expectations that I guess the other native speakers and the second language learners have on them. And it's just, we need to build their linguistic self-esteem, right, to feel more confident. Yes?
Are you going to tell us how you do that?
Yes, so and I guess I could give you like a preview and then you can ask me if I didn't say enough, which is I have a lot of creative projects using Spanish. I want them to sort of love using Spanish for fun things and putting them out there, or even creating materials that then other learners can use. With the help of the instructor, so if you as the instructor say, hey, let's change this, you put mucho educación, let's change it to mucha, right? Where you can edit, there's nothing wrong with that. But to make them feel more confident about, look what I can do with Spanish. We talked about that yesterday when I presented the research on using video conferencing platforms to connect them to native speakers around the world. To me, they're also native speakers, but you know what I mean, like people that are monolingual in Argentina, Mexico, Costa Rica, and a lot of them get really proud and really confident about their Spanish, that they could talk to this person of a different dialect, a person who they don't know, a person who doesn't speak English, and the person thought, wow, your Spanish is awesome. And so they get like, oh my God, look at that, I can speak Spanish just fine. So just with those activities and with time, you build their linguistic self-esteem. Yes. But tell me if I don't cover it enough later. Okay, so best practice number 2. We talked about the rigidity, right, of the right and wrong answers. So in general, best practice would be to favor instructor-graded tasks where they're more creating with language, right? They're getting feedback. They're doing more with the language than just computer-graded quizzes. I'm not saying do not do computer-graded quizzes, but they cannot be the only thing or the main thing that they're doing in a course. Contextualized instruction and feedback is key for heritage learners. Instead of always expecting a correct answer, there could be many more ways of expressing that, and that's where the instructor comes in. Best practice number 3, embrace learner autonomy. In a recent article on heritage language learners of Spanish and their perceptions of online courses, Anderson Mejias found that one of the positive key qualities of online courses included asking students to discover information. As instructors, sometimes we like to control things, right? And we like to say, this is what you're going to read, this is the video you're going to watch, these are the discussion questions. So instead of doing that, let them discover information and bring the information that then you use in class. And I'll show you some ideas of how I do that in my classes. Best practice number 4, allow learners to convey meaningful content to real audiences. And by real audiences, I mean not just classmates and instructors, not just this room right here, or just this particular course. I don't mean that it has to be a native speaker somewhere who doesn't even know them. Not necessarily, right? So there are ways of connecting different classes. So for example, I can say, hey, Maria Luisa, let's connect my Heritage Learner course with yours, and let's do some kind of collaboration project. So they do have an audience. A real audience could be Spanish learners in other classes. So maybe they could create materials for the intermediate or the beginning learner classes, right? That's still a real audience. There's a real purpose for it. And meaningful content, of course. Now, I have to say, not all of the tools that I'm going to show are all about this. A lot of the creative projects I have, yes, they are, but I'm going to also show you other tools that are more like for using class, right, to do some discussion or to, or sometimes it's just discussion forums within the course, and that's okay too. Best practice number 5, the last one, capitalize on the text-based nature of online materials. So one of the things we talked about is developing this literacy skills, so the reading and writing in Spanish. And when it comes to spelling, at least in Spanish, I don't know in other languages, you can teach them the rules until you're blue in the face. But that's not what native speakers are applying when we're writing, right? Sometimes every now and then we remember that one rule, but a lot of times it's just from exposure to written language. There's a lot of reading what actually develops spelling skills. So they need to be exposed to a lot of text-based materials. Plus, I think it does give them appreciation for context-specific forms of communication, right? So you can see how people, when they post a comment on Facebook, what kind of language they use, right? Punctuation, right? Things like that, versus a column in a newspaper, right? And you see what kind of other language they use. So you do need to expose them to different types of text-based materials. Okay, so for this part of the talk, I'm going to be discussing several tools. And like I said, every so often, right, we're going to stop and you're going to discuss and you're going to then tell me what you think. So I think we'll go for a few more minutes and then we'll go ahead and take a break. So how to choose the tools. There are a lot of online tools out there, and it can be overwhelming. Even if you look for what's a tool to do this, and you have like pages and pages of Google search, right, of different results. So one way, this is not the only way, not necessarily the best way, it's just one way, is the Sammer model. Are you familiar with the Sammer model? No? Okay, so I'll try to go through it quickly. You don't have to use it every time, right? This is not like a ruler that you use every time you're selecting something, but it's just to give you an idea of what you could take into account. So the lowest level would be substitution, and it says technology acts as a direct substitute with no functional change. And we can argue on the functional change part. The example that is typically given is, for example, instead of taking notes in a little notepad on a piece of paper, you take notes using Notepad on your computer. Just a direct substitute is not adding a whole lot more, right? Augmentation, and sometimes augmentation and modification is hard to really say this tool belongs here, this tool belongs here. So don't get too crazy about classifying every tool perfectly. So for augmentation, it is a substitute, but now there's some kind of functional improvement. So maybe we can think of Microsoft Word, and now you have a spell check, right? That's helping you a little bit more than if you were writing in a piece of paper. Modification, technology allows for significant task redesign. And I think a lot of the times what is given here as the example are things like Google Docs, right, where people can now collaborate, right, and we can give feedback to each other. There's the task now changed, right? It's not just I'm going to turn in this paper to the teacher. And then the last level, the R, is called redefinition, and it's probably the hardest one to achieve. It says technology allows for the creation of new tasks previously inconceivable. And to me, the best example for this level in the case of language learning and technology is these platforms that connect native speakers with students, right? The video conferencing platforms. Skype, if you will, right? But even better, those platforms that already have a bank of native speakers ready to go, they make an appointment, right? How easy is that? And then the student can chat with video speakers around the world from the comfort of their home, right? It would be previously inconceivable without the technology. So this is just a set of guidelines, right? We are not saying you should always reach for the R, or if S is bad, right? Nobody's saying this. This is not a quality matter. This is just to think about, because if perhaps you realize this is just substitution, why am I requiring students to use this tool, right? You need to be more flexible. Perhaps there is no reason to require them. Okay. So what are some key questions that you ask yourself when you're considering different technology tools? What are some factors that you think about?
How much will it cost?
Here we go. How much does it cost? Good. What else?
How to integrate it in what we already have.
Right. How am I going to use this? How am I going to integrate it? Yes.
What's the benefit of this tool?
Yes. What's the difference, right? Why should I use it? What's the benefit? That's great.
What's the learning curve? Can my students use this tool easily?
Yes. Right. It's easy to use. Very good.
What rubric would I use to give them feedback?
Ah, you're thinking more like overall, right? They're using this, they're producing this, creating this. How do I assess this? Very good. Any other questions? Okay, so some of the ones you've already mentioned. So first of all, yes, is it useful, right? Why should I use it? What's the benefit of it? Is it accessible? So as we already talked about, right? Is it safe? There are a lot of tools out there, not a lot of them are safe, right? So you don't want to ask your learners to be using a tool that then is going to install spyware in their computer, right? Yes?
Oh, you're thinking safe like that. I was thinking like psychologically safe.
That too. Why not? Yes.
I've been using a program called Conversify, which is one of these
Yes.
that hooks them up with native speakers.
Yes.
And I was amazed at how many students said they came to me and said, "I'm just too anxious to do it."
Yes. Oh, we'll talk about
the
it.
amount of anxiety that it caused
Yes.
them was kind of surprising to me.
Yes. So let's talk more about it. I have it in a slide, and I included Conversify.
Yeah.
So yes, let's definitely talk about it. But even then, it's safe in the sense of who's out there, right? A lot of these platforms that are free and connected with native speakers, is it safe? And that's something that you need to think about. For a while, we used another platform that was free called WeSpeak that I have recently found out that it has vanished. And it was because what happens when you create something that anybody can create a username and password for, you get people out there that are not interested in learning languages. And so we've had a lot of female students that felt uncomfortable, and sometimes they would say things like, muchos de los hombres no tienen camisetas en sus fotos.
Oh yeah, no, that's weird. That's totally weird.
Right, so that's the other part of, is it safe? Is it safe in terms of also sharing, right? If you're going to ask them to publish a video in YouTube, are you going to allow for people to post comments or not, in that sense of safe?
But also they can go in your computer and damage your hard drive. Not only
Sure.
that.
Yes, right. So safe in that, and safe in many different ways, right? Is it reliable? Some of these sites come and go, so you cannot be tied down to a site that may come and go. Otherwise, you have to redesign your task and what you ask them to do. You should always have a similar backup plan. And this sometimes happens many times in the course of the semester, right? You can check everything at the beginning of the year, you're ready to go, and then one day before it's due, when everybody's trying to do it, they tell you it's not working. Yeah.
Isn't that kind of hard to know though, how to predict whether or not
Yes.
a tool is going to go into oblivion?
Absolutely. Yes, these are key questions. This is not foolproof. Anything can happen with the internet, but you get a sense of how reliable a tool is based on how long it's been, right?
Yeah.
How many teachers are there using it, right? That's what I mean. Don't just go by the first thing you Google, the first thing that pops up, and you use it, right? So that's what I mean. And also reliable and accessible in terms of the different devices that the students might be using, right? Where it could be working great in my computer, but then with Chromebooks, then with Macs is a different issue. Firefox, Chrome, right? So in that sense too. Is it versatile? Meaning, do I have to have the students use a different tool for every different task that they're going to do? Or can I use this site for different tasks, right? So one place for different things. Is it easy to use? I think that's what we shared already. And I want to emphasize the fact that you have to try it yourself first, as best as you can. Something like Conversify or Talk Abroad, you're not going to be the one having a conversation with the native speaker, but you need to at least create an account. What does that look like? Is it easy for the students to navigate? And yes, is it free? So I don't even ask how much does it cost. I ask, is it free?
Yeah.
And if it's not free, is it worth it? Sometimes there are alternatives out there, or different ways of doing it with PowerPoint or Google Forms, right? There's other ways that you can be creative with it. And the reason why I lead with, is it free, is because I feel that students are already paying a lot for their course materials, and we need to be careful with what we're expecting them to buy. And also, even as teachers or college professors, I don't want to be just buying access to every single tool that I want them to use. And the last one, this is maybe perhaps a pet peeve of mine, but is an account required, right? Do I have to create an account and give personal information to this site? And what are they going to do with that information, right? Part of the being safe too. There are some tools out there that don't require accounts. And it's also easier to be accessing them in class, right? If it's just a link and you don't have to log on, it's a lot easier too. A lot of sites now are sort of integrated with Google, right, with Gmail. So sometimes you can just log on with Gmail, or you can create, probably Google doesn't want me to say this, but you could create sort of this fake Gmail account, and that's the one you use to log on to all of these tools. So it's not actually connected to your Gmail. Some of the key questions I asked myself for heritage language instruction with technology. Does it allow my heritage language learners to express themselves, right? And express themselves in terms of choice, what they're going to talk about, what they're going to learn about, discovery, right? How do I make this task and this tool work for them to go and discover information? Creativity, like I said, I love creativity. I love them creating videos, creating stories, creating comics, right? Like I want them to get creative with language. And of course, personalization, right? What do they do, probably more related with the task, but even something like interacting with native speakers, I want them to make that experience their own, right? Not me telling them exactly what they should be asking the native speaker. And the other key question for me is, does it help to strengthen the oral visual connection? Our heritage language learners struggle with spelling, and spelling is a lot of what does it sound like, what does it look like written. I know that to them it sounds just fine, and they write, well, you could say phonetically, right? They write as it sounds. And so what I want them to strengthen is that connection between this is what the word sounds like, this is what it looks like written. And by that, I mean reading and listening, right? So they're listening to something as they're reading, or listening and writing. Okay, the first tool I have is text readers. I think I'll show you this one, and then we'll take a little break, if that's okay. All right, so text readers. This is mostly just for fun, perhaps to make them laugh, but to approach the issue of accents and how the accent can make a difference on how the word sounds, or the ñ and no ñ. So this will be more for guided discussions in class. And I have it open here. So text readers are programs where you can type a sentence, and then you click play, and I have it here. I'm going to use Spanish, but they have different languages, right? And so right now I have Spanish, Mexico, and it says Camila, right? So it's a female voice. So hopefully this will work, right? Oh, I don't know how to type accents in your computer. That's going to be an issue.
It should be here. So you type these
Oh, okay. This one and the
this
vowel?
One and the vowel.
There we go.
It.
Thank you. Right, so in this case, you can then play it.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Hola, ¿cómo estás?
So you could help them, because sometimes they tell you, at least ours claim, I don't hear the difference. I think if you play different ones several times, I think they would be able to hear the difference. But then you can discuss like how this one doesn't make a difference, right? That accent doesn't make a difference in how you say it. The other one I like. Oops, hang on. Let's delete this so you don't have to hear them again.
Mi mamá y mi papá. Mi mamá y mi papá.
So this is mostly just to make them laugh, just for fun, right? But see if they can tell the difference, and then maybe they can suggest others. What are others you want to try? And let's keep trying to, yeah.
I just want to mention something that in Mexico, people would say some rural
Yes.
words. Yeah. Mi mama y mi papá.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that would be mi mama y mi papá.
Well, but that's something that you can discuss. That's what I mean by
Right,
guided
exactly,
discussions.
But just that to mention that it's not as clear cut as
Right.
with accents and with no accent
Yes.
changes the meaning.
Yes.
Because you can hear that in some parts of Mexico for sure.
I think that's great, and that's something you can add. I would probably add that some people that might not be familiar
Exactly.
with that particular distinction, how they're going to assume you're saying my potato, right?
Well, and then the preterite, right? Hablo versus hablo.
Right.
That's a big one.
Right. We could try it here.
Hablo. Hablo.
Oh, that one didn't work. And some of them don't. The other one I tried that didn't do it was Inglés.
Pero ese sí, inglés es
Right, but yes. But again, this is what I mean, guided discussions, right? Because it's not perfect. But you can try different ones and see how it makes a difference or doesn't make a difference. Or, so for example, maybe the distinction between S and C, right? Which in Spain, Spanish from Spain with the ceceo, it sounds different. But Latin America, for us, it doesn't sound different. So then you could select Spanish from Spain, right? So a speaker from Spain, and then play those two for them and see if they can notice how right?
Casa.
Yes. So let's take a little break, and then we'll keep playing with tools. Okay. All right. So we just started. So this was the first tool, so just to recap a little bit, we talked about this helping them making that oral visual connection. And another task that I like to do and that I like my students to do that it definitely encompasses this making the visual oral connection is captioning and subtitling. Captioning is when you basically transcribe where the person is saying, same language. Subtitling usually implies translation, right? And subtitling, I understand it's not going to be the exact match of what it sounds like to what it looks like, but it's still writing in Spanish, right? So one site you can use that is fairly easy to use is amara.org. You do have to create an account, or you can just log in with Gmail. And I'm not going to show it to you right now. It would probably take too long, but you can put a link to any YouTube video, and the video pretty much appears, right, in their system. And then you say, I'm ready to enter captions or translations, what language, and basically you are transcribing. Or you can transcribe everything, right, in a Google Doc first. And then when you're ready, you can enter those transcriptions. And it's fairly easy to use. At the beginning, there is a learning curve with any kind of captioning and subtitling software. But I tried a couple ones, and this one to me was the easiest one. It's basically like arrow up, arrow down. It keeps adding where it needs to go, right? So the start here, and then at what point do you want to cut? Arrow down. Start here, at what point do you cut? And so they appear, right, little by little. It also has some guidelines, like they tell you there's too much text, right? Add another line, or, right, so to help you with that. And then it looks pretty clean, right, with a sort of black background and white letters. And so some tips to implement this in the classroom. So the first would be to start small. Transcription, which is basically what captioning is, requires a lot more time than what the video is. So you do have to keep it short, break longer videos into shorter segments. And then one way that you can start the students getting more comfortable with captioning would be something like edit the captions. So perhaps you have the captions, which you can do in a Word doc, right? It doesn't have to be in the system necessarily. They watch the video and they have to pay attention to whether what they're listening matches what the captions are. And then they can go ahead and edit the captions if something doesn't make sense. And you see this in real life a lot. I don't know if you've ever played a YouTube video and you asked YouTube to play the automatic closed caption, and you go, what on earth is that word? So it does happen. Those automatic closed captions don't work very well all the time, and so that's one way of editing the caption, right? I'm not saying use the captions in YouTube, because some of the things are just outrageous, but you could do it so that you're focusing maybe on certain words that you want them to pay attention to what they sound like and what it is. So for example, in the case of Spanish speakers, things like voy a hacer or va a hacer, right? Because it all sort of blends together. Is it hacer, like ser, or a hacer, right? So things like that, where you can get them to pay attention and be like, is that what they're saying, or do we need to edit the captions?
The same errors that they sometimes make.
Of course, because it's really what it sounds like. Probably this is what it looks like written. right? So that's just to help them with things like that. I haven't seen in YouTube whether YouTube recognizes things like va ser, if the caption looks correctly or not. My guess is that sometimes it probably doesn't look right. And like I said, so break up longer videos into shorter segments. I would probably keep it really, really short at first, right? So that they can handle transcribing just 1 minute, right? It might sound really short to you, but if you're transcribing a minute, it takes a while and you have to edit it, right? Right. The other things you can do would be like complete the captions, and it happens sometimes that captions get stuck, right? And the person keeps talking and the caption doesn't display, right? So what else is here? So they're not transcribing the whole thing, but at what point do we need to add that line? Yes.
So now we're going to search the internet for bad captions?
No. No.
Send us your worst captions.
No. That's not what I meant. I'm just trying to give it like the real context. What you could do is obviously you leave it out in the Word doc, and they have to listen to it and just transcribe that one sentence. Yes. Right. This is just to get started. I'm not saying this is necessarily the technology part. This is just to get them comfortable with capturing if they feel kind of like overwhelmed by the whole prospect of I have to transcribe a video. And it does happen when I learned English in Argentina. I first of all, I didn't want to learn English. Let's start with that. I told my parents I don't need this language. And so I dropped out of English class. I did not want it. But then I started watching a lot of sitcoms, which were in English with the subtitles in Spanish. And it's through subtitles, not captions. But every now and then, the subtitles would get stuck. And so I had to then pay attention to what was going on, right? Because there were no more subtitles. So that kind of reminded me of that. It'd be like, maybe we can use it as in complete the captions, not the subtitles. But you could do it with subtitling too. And let's be cautious about obviously subtitling and translation, which is an art form, right? It's a very complex skill. So let's not assume that just because they are bilingual that they are expert translators, right? None of us are really. But we do, I hope, want to encourage translation as a skill that they have, right? And that's what makes them bilingual professionals here in the US. And so translation is, to me, a very valuable skill for language and also for the real world. I would say start by showing examples of translation. Have sometimes words, phrases get shortened, right? Or there's a little bit of circumlocution going on. Not everything is going to be translated literally. Select very easy segments that they can probably translate easily at first. Very important for heritage learners, for everybody, but for heritage learners, using a wide variety of videos from different countries, right? They should, if we want to expand their bilingual range and appreciation for other dialects, they should get used to that. Some dialects are going to be a little harder for them to understand in order to transcribe. Others are going to be a little bit easier. And then in terms of the variety of videos, is because let's not only do short films, right, where it's particular language. Things like commercials, things like testimonials, where now it's more colloquial language, spoken language that they can probably relate to, understand very easily. What does that look like when you write it out? TED Talks, if you want to get a little bit more scripted and academic. Street interviews, right? People answer on the spot. Those still need captioning. And there's so many wonderful short films on YouTube and Vimeo that you can use. Commercials, right? Usually it's very little language that's there, so those are also good for captioning. And then integrated with within a larger project. Don't just make it one add-on thing like, go transcribe this video, okay, we're done, right? So I think it would be great if you give it more of a context. So for example, let's say there's a video that you really want to use with your second language learners, but you're like, oh, they're going to have a hard time understanding this. And yet the heritage learners could help you because they understand what they're saying. But sometimes the captions help second language learners understand what's going on. So you can, recruit them to help you.
Do they ever feel taken advantage of? That's the only thing I would be a little bit worried about.
No, I mean, of course, this is part of like a class project, if you will. It's not a, hey, can you help me with the lesson plan?
Sort of like, I don't know.
Yes, no, I understand, but it's more of a planning ahead, right? It can be, I found this video that is great, who can help me?
Yeah, no, I get that.
It should be more of a, you have your collection of videos that you plan on using at some point in the future with your second language learners, and then you're like, okay, I can use this in my heritage language class, where I can ask them, we're gonna transcribe these videos, right? Or caption these videos. Or subtitling, right? So translation, right? Sometimes that can help too. And translating from Spanish to English is going to be easier for them. So if you're going to do the Spanish to English versus English to Spanish, you can do that too. Was there a question or, yeah?
I had a comment.
Okay.
I'm glad we use technology to have you here.
Okay.
I'm glad you came.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. And let's not forget the collaboration portion of it. There's different ways that you can incorporate collaboration in a captioning project. So for example, you can have groups caption different segments, and then they can review each other's work. And that would imply that not only I transcribe this 1 minute, but now I have to watch another minute and see if that's okay with the captions, right? Or two teams caption the same video, and then they compare if their captions match, right? If they are on agreement with everything. And obviously, when you have a video, like we said, this is very time consuming, so you do want to break it up into smaller segments. And if you assign it to different groups, that's going to make the task a lot more manageable. Another way of incorporating this visual oral connection in technology is to do dictation. So I'm sure you've heard of dictation or dictados in Spanish, and it usually has a somewhat negative connotation.
Yes.
Okay.
Old-fashioned.
Old-fashioned, right? Very almost drill-like, right? Okay. So let's give dictation a little bit of credit in that it does work to improve spelling. And this is how in a lot of schools, at least in Argentina, this is how we are taught spelling, right? Every morning there's dictado, and you have to write, and then you get corrected. And research has shown, I think they did it for Korean learners, that frequent dictation, not just once or twice here and there, but when the learners had to do dictation almost every day in class, they actually improved heritage learners in their spelling. But you have this drill or boring perception of dictation that you have to overcome. So one way that we do it is the part that is transcribed, so the dictation part, has to have a purpose other than just transcribe for the sake of transcribing. So for example, in our online course, they have different sentences about Guillermo Vega, which is one of the stories that they read in the book, and then they have to write it out, right? So I recorded the audio, just reading that one sentence, and the student types it. We know what it sounds like, what it looks like. And then on the step 2, they have to say whether that was true or false for this story. So instead of, I'm going to give you the list of sentences and tell me is it true or false, they have to transcribe them first. Then they say if it's true or false.
You do it sentence by sentence?
Yes. So it's the same, I'm sure that you've done true false about readings, right? And instead of here's the list or the PowerPoint with the sentences, they have to write them down first, and then they have to do different things you can do. You can also do sentence starters, right? Where it's like they just hear the first part of the sentence, they transcribe that, they have to complete it, right? Questions, you can have them transcribe the questions first, they have to answer them. There's different ways that you can incorporate it.
In the audio, it's not a question, it's just a sentence.
It's me, my lovely voice, reading su hijo todavía no ha terminado su licencia en historia. And they had to type it out.
Which website do you use for that? One of those that you mentioned before?
No, this is, so our learning management system is Moodle.
Moodle.
I think here you use Canvas.
And
Canvas.
yeah.
I've used Blackboard, right? So there are all these sites where you can create the quizzes, and at least in Moodle, Blackboard. I'm not too familiar with Canvas, but I'm sure that is also possible. You can insert an audio file, and then, so that's basically what it is.
With
right.
definitions, and they have to write the whole now.
I'm sorry?
If you dictate the definition and they have to also...
You can do that too? Yeah.
That's what's spelling specifically.
We're mainly targeting spelling, but it's still kind of a comprehension quiz on the reading that they did. Right. Yes.
And there's also a very good tool that is Typeform that you might find interesting, and it's free.
Which one?
Typeform. Typeform. For your
Typeform.com.
Thank you.
What is it for? I'm sorry, I'm not
It's
familiar.
like for forms, so you can upload your recording. You can create like a complete half a sentence. You can true or false. You can
Right.
set your own things.
Right.
And it's very user friendly and very easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to do, if you don't have Moodle or Canvas or anything like that, you could also do like a Google form, right? And then you can create Google Forms using that. I've seen teachers who do, so when they do the dictation, instead of just doing audio, they do webcam. So they see the person saying the sentence. So that's another possibility too. We just went with audio, but you could do video. Okay. Another idea that I plan to incorporate next semester is to do dictation as part of a forum discussion, right? So where the students have to listen and transcribe the first part of a story, and then they come up with the ending, right? A little bit more creative. Or when we do argumentation, they listen and transcribe a thesis statement, then they have to offer arguments to support it, for example. And then the key thing about this is that you have to set it, at least in Moodle is possible, and I also know in Blackboard it is, I'm sure that Canvas has a similar feature, that you select that students must post first before they can see other students post. And so that way they do have to transcribe it themselves, they do have to come up with something themselves, and then they see it. And then when they see the answers that everybody else came up with, not only they compare the ideas, like for example, how creative the endings were, who was pessimistic and optimistic and all that, but just in terms of the transcription of the audio part. Did everybody transcribe that first part the same? And by making it into a forum, so it's not a computer-graded activity, the instructor can also then go ahead and give some feedback in terms of the transcription part. Because in this one here, as you can see, the computer is grading this, right? And so we had to be careful to make sure that all possible answers and variations were into the answer key. We cannot anticipate everything, but as much as we can. And the students sometimes do get stuck that maybe there was, they forgot, maybe we put it that capitalization was not an issue, but I don't know, there could be an extra comma, for example, and then the system tells them that's not right? And so by making it more of an open forum where the instructor can give feedback on their transcription, it helps in terms of the instructor. So let's stop here. What do you think so far? Talk to your little groups. Which of these would you use, or would you not use any of them? That's okay. So what do you think? Would you use any of this so far? You will? Okay. Any other ideas, maybe? Similar to using these tools? No? Any thoughts you want to share?
We liked it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was always hesitant about dictation. When I was a little girl in my school, I have dictation every morning.
Yes.
But I like it. It was a moment. You relax. Yeah. And then you don't think too much. You are not for you just abandon.
One of the things I said is that one of the things that we focus on is being able to, it is more academic Spanish, right? Being able to come up with a cogent argument.
Yes.
So I liked the idea of having a statement and then they have to come up with a supporting evidence.
Respond to it.
So it sort of becomes a dictation into a short composition.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I mean, and I think there's nothing wrong, mean, if you like to do dictation because of just the exercise, and the students already know every morning we're going to be, dictation, a couple sentences, right? It's not too big of a deal. I just like to make it meaningful, incorporate it with the rest of the class, not to be a gratuitous, just transcribe these sentences, give them to me, let's move on, right? That's what makes it more of a drill. Okay, so let's keep going. The next idea that connects the oral part and the visual part, right, so the written and speaking, would be interviews. So the interview as a genre incorporates both speaking and then writing. There's different ways you can do it. So you could do what I would call asynchronous interviews using platforms such as Flipgrid. Have you used Flipgrid?
I've heard about it.
You've heard about it, okay. So I'll show you Flipgrid if the website is still open. And then synchronous would be real time using, for example, a platform like Talk Abroad. So Talk Abroad is a platform that connects students with native speakers. Conversify would be another one, although Conversify is a little bit different in their model of how it works compared to Talk Abroad. And I have lots of platforms to tell you about, similar to Conversify and Talk Abroad. So I'll get there. Question?
I just had a question about, this semester I used Conversify in a film course that just happened to have some native speakers. And I found that the heritage speakers, and I found that they were actually less interested in the Conversify than the L2 learners. And so I was wondering how you approach it for heritage learners.
Yes. Let's get there when we get to the platforms. Absolutely. I think that's a great question. Yes. So Flipgrid is basically a video board, if you will. So when you think of discussion boards, you typically think of written, right? So instead of written, there's nothing written. They're all videos. So a video of the post, video of the comment, they're all videos. The written part is the instructions, right? You have to give them a prompt. So this one in particular, so this is a Flipgrid board that we created on cultural practices and perspectives because we wanted people from all countries and places to comment on it. So comment on topics such as bad words, swearing, affection in public, giving feedback to somebody, listening and talking, like interrupting in some cultures versus not, or looking at somebody or not, giving and receiving presents, accepting compliments, cultural faux pas, saying how are you, because a lot of international students, including myself, notice that in America if you say how are you, you're just supposed to keep it short, fine, thank you, and you. Whereas we tend to give you the whole story of how our day went. So we learned that the hard way. So I'll show you, for example, cultural, and of course you can do your board around anything you want. So for example, speaking with Maria Luisa, I was telling her how I really wanted to start creating a collection of responses of videos on bilingual experiences. And so you could have the parents' side of it, right? What was it like to raise a bilingual child? Was it easy to stay in one language or not? What decisions did you make along the way? Reading in the language, etc. But also for the students, right? To sort of share their own experiences. A lot of our heritage learners share amazing experiences about being in ESL programs that sometimes just, sort of get lost in everything. And so it would be great to have this. And then obviously there's different settings. This is said to be public, so anybody can go in and you can use any of the videos if you want and use them in your class, or you can ask your students to post responses. They don't have to have any particular permission. So
Is it all in English?
No. So it says you can answer in English or in any language you're comfortable with. The reason why we put it for this particular board was because we wanted responses from anyone willing to give their perspectives. We were just, we had a workshop on interculturality, and we realized that some teachers may not be familiar with, how, in different countries what their perspectives or practices are, which is, even me as a native speaker of Spanish, I know how we do things maybe in Argentina or maybe just in my family or with my friends, but that doesn't mean everybody in Argentina does the same thing or that everybody who speaks Spanish does the same thing. So we wanted to create something where people can express their own perspective on it, and perhaps there could be two speakers from Mexico saying two different things, right? And so that's something else to bring to the classroom.
So you can create the board as
You create the board. You can then create, I don't know all the terminology, but create a sort of section, right? Where you give them a title and you give them the instructions, try to keep it short. And then what the students would do is tap to record. So they click on this little thing. It tells them, can I access your webcam? You say yes. I think they, you have to, this is now owned by Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken, and they have promised to make it free for teachers forever. You log in with your Gmail account, and then you speak to the webcam. You say your little answer, and you're done, and it uploads it. And yes, it does, I mean, kind of silly, but you can add little things to your profile picture.
Do they ever feel uncomfortable sharing a video of themselves?
So, okay, that's a really good question. So if you're gonna make it into, and here I am, if you're gonna make it into a class assignment, I think it's for any class assignment, then you have to give them choices. So I tell the students, if you're not comfortable uploading your video there, just let me know, and then you can send the video just to me, and I watch it, I grade it. None of the students have had an issue with it. Of course, it depends on what kind of stories or what kind of things you're asking them to share. You can also have them, if you want, they can not be on camera, right? Yeah. So you just hear their voice.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes, I mean there's
a stuffed animal in front of them.
They can put a stuffed animal, absolutely. They can get as creative as they want, yes. Okay, so then basically you would, as you can see here, so the student recorded, and then do you see this little bubbles here? So those are students who have responded to the video. Oh. And so if you wanted to do it as an asynchronous interview, so the student could start by posing a question, and then the classmates would then record the response to it, right? So that's just one way you can do it. And then by being relatively easy to use, where you just do that and you record on your webcam and you're done, then you could partner with other schools, or even with schools abroad, if you know, and then they just go ahead and record there, right? So it doesn't have to be that they're interviewing their classmates, right? You can just do more of a telecollaboration project.
Will you show us one of the answers?
Sure. Would you like in Spanish or English?
Yeah, Spanish.
Okay, so we have, for example, Monica. She's from Puerto Rico.
And what's the prompt?
Hola. Oh, this one, hang on. No, this one, she got the prompt wrong, sorry. Let's do, I don't remember. It was such a good video, but I don't think she understood the cultural faux pas. Instead, she just gave tips on things that people misunderstand when they go to Puerto Rico. So she took her own. Okay, I don't remember if Lauren got, if she spoke in English or Spanish.
So my husband and I are from different countries. He's from Spain and I'm from the United States. And when I first visited his family in Granada, España, we went out to dinner, and I wanted to make a really good impression on my future brother-in-law and his wife. And so we went to a town called Montefrio, which is very local and very small, but very beautiful. And they ordered a salad. And one of the things is that there was small tomatoes, like cherry tomatoes or plum tomatoes, and they were just individual bites. So only 3 tomatoes came on the salad that we shared as a table. And I didn't know if I should take one of the cherry tomatoes or not. And they do a lot of serving of communal plates in Spain. And so every time they ordered something to share and there was an odd number, I felt so uncomfortable because I didn't have a question and I didn't want them judging me for taking too much or not trying enough or things like that. Anyways, I ended up crying to my husband because I just felt so much pressure. Speaking a different language, meeting new people, trying to make a good impression, and then worrying about these cherry tomatoes. So, since then I've learned that nobody's counting, everybody's trying to have a good time, and as long as you just follow what everybody else is doing, everything will be okay.
Oh my God, that's so cute. She's a really good friend of mine. She's at College of Charleston. I just really liked her little story. But anyway, so these are and all these videos. You can go in later and watch them. You can watch any of these. Mine and Annie and Abbott. She's a professor at Illinois. She shared about Italy. and what kind of drinks you should order or not order according to the time of day. A lot of these were my undergrad students. They recorded their own cultural faux pas.
In Spanish or English?
For the level of the learners that I had, I asked them to record in English because I knew that they just couldn't handle narration in Spanish.
Oh yeah, sure.
But for heritage learners, they're really good at telling stories in Spanish. I would ask them to record in Spanish. And again, you can use it yourself, meaning this is open. So if you like the prompt, you want to use it with your learners, you don't have to recreate it. And then you just tell them which language. You're going to see in the instructions any language, but you tell them specifically. For this class, record in this language. And you can go in and watch their videos. Yeah.
They've enjoyed this? You got good feedback from this?
The students really liked it. They tend to like it better than the traditional forums, you know, of just the posting there. And then being able to see other people, not just their classmates there. That also adds another element. And you can always monitor it, so you can always delete videos that you don't like. Or, I mean, nobody has ever posted anything inappropriate or comments that are mean, so. A lot of teachers are using Flipgrid. That's really the only people that are on Flipgrid. Yes.
Can you make it private, just for the
yes.
school? Yeah.
Yes. Again, it's just this particular example that I'm showing. This board of the cultural practices, we wanted to make it open, but you can absolutely, and a lot of teachers do make it private. Yes. Okay, but there's a lot of others. So part of the project also, what we said, for example, was to.
So my husband.
Oh, I'm sorry. To watch other videos. So this is the one where they had to record, but then they had to write a post reflecting on other things. So some of them, for example, were interested in the concept of swearing, right, and how different cultures view it differently, things like affection in public and things like that. So for this, they just watched the videos of other people sharing it, and then they wrote a reflection in Moodle as a discussion forum. Okay. Let's keep going here. Okay, so let's talk about Talk Abroad. So there's a lot of platforms out there right now that are connecting students with native speakers. Here, just a few of them. Some are actual websites, some are apps. I did an entire webinar about these last fall. Yes, last fall. And the webinar is recorded. So if you go to our center's website, click.illinois.edu, you see the webinar recordings there. So the one that we use the most, we still use and we still love, is Talk Abroad. Talk Abroad works by basically hiring native speakers in various countries, not just Spanish, but they're big in Spanish. And then the speakers receive some very basic training, like how to be, polite to the second language learners, to be patient. They get people that are very reliable, because the students are making an appointment with these speakers and logging on at a certain time, etc. They have fantastic customer service or tech support. So if anything happens and the student needs to reschedule, they're very prompt to reschedule or contact the students. They handle all of the questions, so you as the teacher don't have to worry about any of that. It is paid. It is not free. Yeah. So this is one of those, if it's not free, is it worth it? For us, it is. Because we feel like we'd rather ask the students to purchase credits to talk through Talk Abroad than to buy a book. So that's what we do, and that's how we get the students to buy those credits. We have our own activities in class rather than a textbook. Yes?
Sorry to interrupt. These are the student purchase or pay individually, or will be through the language laboratory?
Oh, they'll take whatever you want.
Okay.
They'll take anybody's money. So you can have it, yes, you can have the students pay, you're going to have your school pay. Okay. We just don't have the funding from anywhere to purchase the credits. But if you have a grant or something like that and want to use it, yes. And speaking of grants, they do have a grant program. So you can apply if you want to try it, and you say, I want to use it for this, and they'll give you the codes for free for that semester. So just to mention that. And so Talk Abroad, they offer 30-minute conversations. Now they incorporated 10-minute conversations for the novice learners. For my learners, 10 minutes would be too short, and then it would be, why am I paying for this? And I would agree. 30 minutes where they can get a little bit more into the conversations, and they do it as part of a project. So they're researching topics such as gender roles, the education system in their country, right? So they have more to talk about. Very, very infrequently we get a learner that says, we ran out of things to talk about. So going back to your question about what do heritage learners think about that, I wish you had been there yesterday. Yeah, so I compare their perceptions. They did an online survey, right, to see what they thought of. And granted, we only had 7 heritage learners that completed the survey, but they were all happy. Now, it depends on what you want them to get out of it. Yeah. If it's speaking practice, it's not going to work. Yes, they're going to think, what was this for? Yeah. So we don't call it speaking practice. They have to research these topics. And so when they're talking to these people about these complex topics, they feel like they're learning more about other perspectives, other ways of doing things. It's just a different goal. None of them said that it helped their language because they were our learners. They were already pretty proficient in spoken language. But a few of them appreciated the fact that they were able to carry out these conversations without worrying so much about their grammar or using the right word, etc. And so that helped them too in terms of their motivation as well.
I think also cultural, so what I emphasized with this one heritage speaker who came to me and said, I have people to talk to already.
Yes.
I said, well, but do you talk to people from Mexico and Spain? I was doing Conversify, and she was like, no. And I'm like, well, so then think about, what you can learn about their culture. Make this a cultural exploration.
Yes, and one of them in the comments wrote, I like being able to talk to people that I don't talk to every day.
Yeah.
And we piloted a lot of these. We've been doing this for years. So we already created a Q&A, frequent Q&A part in Moodle so the students can read it, and we tell them exactly why. Why can I talk to family and friends? This is why. And so, as people, sometimes people who don't speak English, they're not going to have the same references. They're not going to know you. They might speak a different dialect. I mean, there's so many reasons we give them, and then they're like, okay, I'm open to it. So sometimes it's just you have to anticipate and you have to understand what are they going to get out of it. And it is different than what the second language learners are going to get out of it in general. There was another hand, yes.
We do it a little different in my school.
Okay.
Or university, because what we do is that we leverage with both things our language lab, so they can have a lot of traffic.
Yes.
And also with our partners abroad.
Okay.
So what we do is that we do really an exchange with a class that is either in Mexico, Ecuador, or any of the universities that we work with. And this is by far the activity that the students like the most throughout the semester. Because we ask them to write a short composition about their experience.
Yes.
And it's always the thing that they like the most.
Yes.
Because we do it with a partner, it allows us to have a little bit more control in terms of, is it secure?
Right.
Are the students talking about things that are not going to be extremely uncomfortable?
Right.
That kind of thing. So it does help a lot.
Sure, absolutely. And if you have the capability of forming these partnerships, is great. In my case, I don't have a lot of time to be contacting people who might not know me. Figure out time zones, it's a little bit too much on my plate, on my situation, because I coordinate many different courses. If you have the luxury of just smaller classes and you can make it happen, absolutely, it's great. And then you don't even have to pay anybody. One thing with Talk Abroad, though, the students sometimes like the fact that they're talking to somebody who is an engineer or somebody who is there's a wide range of people they can talk to, and it is safe, right? Because these people are getting paid for it, they're being vetted, they're being trained, but they're not teachers, right? And so there's pros and cons to different things, and they get different things out of it.
They talk to students, not to teachers, to people that are like them, right?
Yes.
But I don't do the coordination either.
Oh, okay.
It's the person in the language lab.
In the language lab, right.
Yes.
We don't have a language lab, so that, yes. So if you do have somebody who can help you with it, absolutely, that's great. The other, Boomerang is very, very similar to Talk Abroad in their model and in their prices too. Lingua Meeting is a little bit different. They call themselves language coaches, and I don't particularly like that part for heritage language learners. For more beginner and intermediate learners, second language, I think they would feel more comfortable. They don't have this anxiety to talk to a stranger who's a real native speaker. They are native speakers, but they're trained, right? So they can have casual conversations, but they can also help them in terms of, let's practice this, or let me tell you about that, right? Where they can coach them about the language. Conversify. Conversify has a model where you can do it for free if the student agrees to coach the other person in the other language, right? So it's a true language exchange.
Yeah. My students loved that part.
Spanish, English, and some students really, really like that part of being the English coaches. So that's one way that you can do Conversify. I do want to say that they need people. That's how their model works. If they don't have enough students, the model doesn't work. So they are currently recruiting as many classes as they can. So if you're interested, go check them out and say, hey, I want my classes to use it.
I think it's only universities, though, so far.
Probably, you're probably right. And it's only Spanish.
And it's only Spanish.
Yes.
Their model is to branch out beyond that. But it is just universities right now. But they have way more Spanish speakers than English speakers, so they're dying.
Okay. For more English speakers. Right.
Yeah.
So go check them out. And then italki, you may have heard of italki. So these are like tutors all over the world, any language, right? You create a profile and you can help be a language teacher to somebody else. They have italki/partners, and those are conversation partners, and some of them are for free. And the reason why they do that is basically because they want you to think, I had such a great experience, I'm going to hire you as my tutor or as my teacher. Yeah. So the partners tend to be nice. The mixer is free and is somewhat vetted. I'm going to call it that way. Speaky, Hello Talk, completely free. Anybody can be out there. Is it safe? I would say no. But some students really like the app idea of Hello Talk, and they go into their app and they chat with somebody 2 minutes, and I gotta go while they're waiting for the bus. So some students like that. I am more of a control freak, so I like scheduling and making sure everything is going well. And some students really like the spontaneity of who's online, can we talk about something? So it's out there for you to check out if you want to. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about what they do with it, right? So the interviews, and I think they do have to understand the interview as a written genre. It's not just you're going to transcribe everything the person is saying. When you read an interview, you see that some parts are paraphrased, you see that some parts are direct quotes, and even the direct quotes sometimes are edited a little bit. So one thing you can do is, for example, use interviews from YouTube, and then the students are going to write the article version of that interview, right? So you have interviews, for example, Jorge Ramos and Sonia Sotomayor. You watch that interview, and then the students write a short article about it. Where it's not all, Sonia talked about this. Some parts have to be direct quotation, right? That's the transcription part. That's the oral and a visual connection. Of course, they can conduct the interviews themselves, like with those tools that we talked about. You can also compare interviewing somebody they know versus somebody they don't know. And speaking of telecollaboration, I don't know if you know about Teleplaza, but that's a site where you can connect with other Spanish heritage language courses or Latino studies courses. So it's teleplaza.gc.cuni.edu. And I have a sample project of these two instructors, professors, where they collaborated through Teleplaza. So basically in Teleplaza, you enter your information about your learners, what kind of project you're working on or you want to work on, and then that's how teachers find each other. And let me see if I can show you. Nope. Oh, I don't have, oh, I'm sorry. This is one of those that it was open before and now it's not. Let me see if it will open for me. I had a little issue here. So part of their collaboration, right, of these two courses, they created this Google site. And so it says, for example, con tu compañero de colaboración, debes comentar las palabras que aparecen en la siguiente encuesta, right? And so the students, they filled out this particular questionnaire, but first they had to connect and discuss, right, the different word associations like familia, fracaso, español, comunidad, etc. So this is just one of the activities that they came up with. You don't have to set it up this way, of course. I mean, you can do telecollaboration in any way you want. So you could do it more as interviews. You can do it more as emails, right? Like whatever it is that how you want to partner. So Teleplaza is just to find other teachers to collaborate with, and particularly for Spanish heritage language. So let's stop here, a couple minutes. What do you think so far? What would you use? What would you try? Or if you want to start looking them up, go for it. So far, would you use any of these? Interviews, maybe? Yes.
Flipgrid a lot.
Flipgrid, okay. All right. Okay, so let's continue. Screencasting. Screencasting is something we use a lot in our online courses, or so in our hybrid courses, but you can also use it for projects, right? Not necessarily as an instructor thing, but also something that the students can do. There's 2 sites I'm putting here, but there's many more. You probably have heard of Screencastify. A lot of teachers like that. Okay, Screencastify is a Chrome add-on, right? So you add it to Chrome, so it just, some teachers like it. I don't know why. Everybody has different preferences. I really like Screencast-O-Matic. I know it sounds sketchy, but it's not. It's existed for a while. It's free. A free time limit is 15 minutes, which to me is really a long time for a video. I think that's great. And it's so easy to use. You just record it and you save it as an MP4. So you're free to do whatever you want with your video. It has worked really well for me. The other option that I'm listing here called Kaltura, and I found out that Harvard does indeed have Kaltura. You have Kaltura too, that's great. So Kaltura will then not have a time limit if your university has a deal with them, right? And you have a lot more video editing capabilities and storage within Kaltura, which they have called it the safe YouTube, right? So it's a video management system, if you will. But one of the tools within Kaltura is screencasting. And you can do, so let's explain screencasting. Screencasting would be recording everything that's happening in your screen and your voice. So for example, I could be screencasting and recording this presentation and talking at the same time, and everything will be recorded. You can record the screen and your little webcam on the corner if you want, just the screen. What can you use it for? Announcements. So for example, in online courses, sometimes if we want to explain something really quick to announce to the students, we record a little screencast and we post it so students understand exactly what is it that you're talking about. Explanations. I have this example here. I was hoping it would work, but it's not working. The Flash Embedded is not working here. And this is a screencasted video I created on la estructura de un párrafo. So I walk the students through an example in Spanish, right? And so la oración temática, right? And all of that. And so that's recorded there. And then the students complete a little quiz on it. Peer feedback. We use this in our online course for heritage learners. And what research has shown and what we have observed is the giving part. The students give more comments if they're talking. And then the receiving part, people tend to understand comments better, or at least not get as offended by comments. Because when you're just reading the Microsoft Word comment, you don't have tone of voice.
We actually discussed that in my class.
So you don't know if the person is getting annoyed by your text or if they're actually really liking it. But just for the sake of typing comments, sometimes we're very brief, and that can send the wrong messages. So I'll show you an example, and this is within Cultura. Sorry. Where are we? Here we go, Cultura. And this is a student that gave feedback to another student. And you're going to see this here. This is the student's webcam. The student had the webcam blocked and didn't realize. But that's okay, because it works great, because then you cannot see the student, and I can use it as an example. So what we asked them to do is to have the Word doc ready to go with comments ready to go for peer feedback, and then they're going to record it and walk their partner through their comments. If the internet is a little slow, it's going to take a while to load. That's too bad. I haven't had much luck with internet here at Harvard. I don't know if it's just me. Well, it's too bad. So basically, you see the student with the Word doc open, and they're just almost like talking to their partner, right? And so saying things like, me gustó mucho tu introducción, o me interesó mucho tu tema, estoy de acuerdo con XYZ, marqué un par de palabras que me parece que tienes que cambiar, o te faltan acento, or things like, no comprendo muy bien lo que dices aquí, o me gusta que usaste esa evidencia, pero no veo la referencia, right? So if it's not working, that's okay. We can try later and see if maybe it is working. Okay, that's okay. All right. Okay. Okay, so that's peer feedback. You can use it for storytelling, or the students to introduce each other, right? So they can create, we also do this in another online course, where they create a PowerPoint with images relevant to them, and then they sort of present themselves, right, through screencasting. You can do it as storytelling. You can take it a step further, make it interactive. I don't know if you heard of Edpuzzle. Some of you have. Okay. TED-Ed is another option. Basically, these sites allow you to use any video, YouTube video. You put the link, and then you can insert questions within the video. So it would be like a video is playing, and all of a sudden it stops, pauses, and a question appears. You can do a multiple choice question, you can do an open-ended question, right? And then the student answers, the video continues automatically. Whenever you, as the teacher, inserted the question, the video pauses, the question appears, right? So that's one way that you can do, whether, let's say it is the same screencast on la estructura del párrafo, but instead of having the video playing constantly in the questions below, which you know the students are going to go right for the questions and start answering as best as they can, you insert the questions within the video, right? So they have to watch the video, and the video pauses when you insert the question. It is absolutely free, and it's easy to use. TED-Ed, very similar. The difference with TED-Ed is the video appears on the side, the questions appear here. So they could technically keep playing the video. The video doesn't necessarily pause, but it's one way you can create video lessons too. Okay, so let's talk about forms. We talked about forms a little bit before with the dictation. My number one pet peeve with forms, anybody that knows me knows this, is, are they really interactive? I've taken classes where the instructions always say, right, post your answer on this, and then comment on at least two classmates.
Do they do it?
Do they do it? Sure, but why? Me as a student in an online course, I have to force myself to think of what am I going to comment on this person's posting. I didn't feel like commenting. I was told I had to comment. And to me, that just comment on someone, what does that really mean, right? And some of the students just say, this is great, I love it. have a nice day, right? Is that a comment? So what are they doing? So to me, if I'm going to do a form, I give them a clear reason to respond. The response has to be obvious in a way. And I like to go beyond text. So I'll show you examples. So this one is so this was for the composition course, and we were talking about description, narration, and writing vivid descriptions, but also narration. And so they have instructions if they're the first one to respond. They're going to watch that little video that I created for them, and then write a narration description based on the images and the music of the video. The video only has images, so a series of 4 or 5 pictures with music playing. So they have to come up with a story. They have to be creative and come up with a story. Then they have to create their own video with images and music, no words. Then they post it. The next person is going to watch their classmates' video and write a story based on that. They create a new one. The next person comes in, creates a new one, and so that creates a chain. Does it happen that you might have 2 people at the same time? Yes. It's not the end of the world, right? They're still responding to something. They're still posting new videos, and new classmates can go in and create their new stories. You can always take it a step further or integrate this more into class, where perhaps you have them read a story in class, one of the ones that the classmates wrote, and then create a title for it, or read it and then maybe substitute some of the words, right, using synonyms or whatever it is that you're working on with the students, or read it and then match it with the video. Which video matches that story that you just read, right? Another example, so this is more showcasing the discovery of information too. We start by, for the first one, so they have to explore that site called interculturalclassroom.com, and it has a lot of videos it's in Spanish, different perspectives. So one of the videos, for example, says que es cultura, so a person is offering their own definition of what is culture. And so they can watch any of the 8 videos, and then it says write only one, and then connected to what we've been talking about in the classroom. This is a module where we're talking about what is culture, what is interculturality, what is cultural appropriation, etc. And so they can choose any of those videos and write their comments, and then they have to find another site, article, or video related to that topic, so stereotypes, cultural shock, interculturality, etc. And then they have to copy and paste, and then write 2 or 3 questions for their classmates. So when the classmate goes in, they see that link, they see those questions, then they comment, they find something else, right? So they're all finding new articles, new information. And I really like it as an instructor too, because I'm not reading 20 responses saying the same thing about the same reading or about the same video. And they find some things that I'm like, this is great, I'm going to use it next time. So to me, it's a win-win for everybody. And then not everybody's reading the same thing. And they know they're going to read that and they're going to comment on it, and it's clear. There's none of this pressure of what am I going to comment about your post. Okay. Another set of tools involves content curation. I'm sure you've heard of Pinterest.
Yes.
Okay. Or Scoop It. So Pinterest and Scoop It. Pinterest is probably the biggest one. It's really a site where, let's say you find something in online. Right? Let's say somebody shared a video with you, YouTube video that you're like, that's great, I could use that in my class. You pin it. Basically, you're saving it into this board. So you have your boards organized with all of the content that you are curating from out there online. Way back in the day, Pinterest was only about recipes and wedding planning. But now, oh my goodness, teachers have taken over Pinterest, right? So there's so many things and so many boards out there of teachers who have found materials and have their own boards, me being one of them. So you could use it with your students in the sense that, and also Padlet, and I'll talk about it in a minute, they could create, for example, a collection that represents who they are. They can write comments within Pinterest too and explain how they reflect their personality. They can also do thematic collections. We use Scoop It in our composition course for them to collect sources for their papers. So for example, a student was working on the topic of police brutality, and so she collected all of the articles that she could find And we made them write things, a little note to help them remember. So this is good for my paragraph about this, or this is a counter argument, right? So they had their own collection so that they could work on their papers. Plus, as the instructors, we were able to see it and tell them, this is not a good source, this is a good source, right? So to help them select their sources too. And Padlet, I don't know if you're familiar with Padlet, it's very, very, very simple. It's just a board, it's empty. And you can add your little content. Sometimes you can just add like sticky notes, what look like sticky notes. Sometimes you can add a video, you can add pictures, right? So it's another way of creating a collection if you don't want them to have a Pinterest account, for example.
How do they share their Pinterest with you?
That's a good question. So, and it's something you have to anticipate. So Pinterest does work technically. You can view boards without having a Pinterest account, but it's quite annoying what they do because they scramble things, and that makes you, and they even tell you, do you want to see all these resources? Log in. So they're kind of forcing you. If you as a teacher have a Pinterest account, yes, anybody can share the link with you and you see the board beautifully just like they're seeing it. But you have to be logged in.
So you have to be logged in and they have to be logged in to create it.
They have to log in to create it, yes.
Yeah, and for them to see each other's?
We share it with the link, the board with the, yeah.
Where do you share it? Like through email, through?
A discussion forum, for example, and they can post it there.
In an online course, but what about not an online? What about an in-class course?
I'm guessing it depends on how you structure it, but I mean, if you don't mind them sharing each other's email addresses and sending it via email, that's how way you can do it. Or if you want to create a Google Doc that is available for everybody, you have to set it so not anybody can view, but anybody can edit, and everybody can post the links there. You could do that. Were there questions or no? Okay. So let's stop here a couple minutes. What do you think? And then we'll report back. So what do we think so far? We're good?
I loved what
Would you try it?
I loved what you said.
Thank you.
Because I use dry.
Yes.
I really like.
I always struggle with forums and how to make it interactive. Now, are you going to absolutely prevent students from feeling that it's something else they have to do for class? No. Right? You can't. Anything you ask them to do for class, there's always going to be some students who find it as something to do.
But at least it's not. At least it's like a little more communicative.
Yes, at least they don't feel that a natural, gotta force myself to say something because I'm being told to comment. The response is pretty clear. These are the questions. I read your article, let me respond them, and I found something else, right? Okay. I have more, I know. I'm probably running behind, sorry. Okay, so Adobe Spark is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful site if you want your learners to be creative. It is free. It is easy to use. And you can create infographics. Infographics are, for example, this, where you have information in a very graphic form. They have already templates, so the students would then be, maybe changing the icon, changing the text, etc. But the template is already there. They already know where to begin. Posters. They can do, for example, movie posters, which we do. So we read short stories and then we tell them create a movie poster based on this story. So that's something that they do. Flyers, right? So if they're organizing something, or maybe that's just part of the, it's just one of the language tasks you ask them to do, right? So if you had to advertise you teaching one of your skills to somebody else, what would that flyer look like? What skill would you teach? How much would you charge? Right, like all the things that you have to think about. Infographics I like a lot because you need to think about how to summarize information in a clear way. What kind of graphic would go with that? And you can ask them to do things that perhaps others would find relevant. So whether there are statistics about the use of Spanish in that particular community, whether it's things to do in that community, right? Whatever you want them to do. And projects such as 5 things about this or 5 myths about that. Those are pretty simple projects, right? And then they organize the information and they present it. Animated videos, I don't know if you heard about Powtoon.
Yeah, I have a colleague who loves Powtoon.
Powtoon is borderline addictive, but you can spend a whole day in Powtoon and then you realize, oh my god, is it dark already? It's just fun. Is there a learning curve? Absolutely. This is the first Powtoon video I created, and I think it took me over 5 hours because it was the very first one. So I had to figure out, how does this work? How do I change the timing? How do I change where the hand moves? How do I change the font? There's a learning curve. Once you get it, probably then time gets reduced to maybe an hour, 2 hours if you get addictive.
Can we see yours?
Yes. Hopefully it will work. I don't know why I'm not having much luck with internet here, but.
It worked with Flipgrid.
Yeah. Let me see if I try Chrome, because Flipgrid was Chrome. Is that going to make a difference?
Maybe.
It's not going to let me. Here we go. Maybe. It's going slow.
Yeah,
it's okay. Let's see if maybe Chrome works a little faster. Oh, here we go. It's not looking great because it's too slow.
Okay.
It shouldn't look like this. Yeah. It's stuck. Okay. Let's try it in a different browser and see if that works better. I think it crashed. Oh, maybe not. Let's see. Let's try it here. It's not, the internet is a little slow, so it's not looking as smooth as it should, but basically, we don't have to play the music, but basically it's just an animated video, right? So they could create their own to explain something, and it's all really based on text and animations, right, and pictures and things like that. You could create one where instead of music is a person talking, so you could do that too. Okay, we don't have to watch the whole thing, but just to give you an idea of what an animated video looks like. Okay, I can probably close that one. Maybe it'll help the internet go a little bit faster. Okay, and then Biteable is another side. It's very similar. What I like about Biteable is that they have a lot of templates and it's easier to use than Powtoon in terms of time commitment. But it's more restricted because you're using templates already made with certain icons, certain fonts, etc. You can customize it a little bit. Powtoon gives you more freedom to customize, but that requires more time to be creating your video. They're free. Obviously, all of these sites have a paid option, all of them. But they do have a free version, and then you just can upload it directly to YouTube and then share it that way. And you can list it as unlisted on YouTube. You don't have to make it public. Okay. Uh-oh. Oh, here we go. Okay. Mind maps and word clouds. These are other tools you can use to brainstorm, but also for Also for creative writing. And yes, I only had pictures of my dog, and that's what I used. Mind maps are basically associations, right? So you start with a concept, and then you have different nodes of what you associate with that, and then from the node you can do more associations as well. When I teach the methods course, I ask them to create a mind map with the word grammar in the middle. And what do they associate, the new TAs, what do they all associate with the word grammar? You can do something similar to what you saw in the example before with like the word familia, the word español. What do they associate with it? And then from there, where else does it go? They can create one collaboratively. It doesn't have to be just individual, right? Where people are adding notes as they, brainstorm them. You can use it for writing in the sense that, for example, you can have a learner share something about themselves. They can be words or they can be pictures. And then the other person has to write. What can they deduce from this person, right? If they had to write about this person or create a little biography, what would that look like? Or what have they learned from their partner based on this mind map? And those are just two of the tools that you can use. You don't need accounts for those. Mind maps are, most of them, very easily available online.
Is it mindmap.com or mindmup?
Map con una U.
Okay.
Yes.
That's weird.
The other one is word art. Word art creates word clouds. It is so easy to use and fun to customize. You don't need an account, and it is free, and you download it as a JPEG. So for example, this is just one example of how you can use it. The learners can come up with a list of words. So one of them has to be the name of the character, maybe where it takes place, other relevant words for the story, some kind of a graphic that depicts that, and then a partner has to come up with a story based on this, right? So what does this call evoke? You've got the name of the character, right? And you can take it wherever you want. I know some teachers use it for learners to introduce themselves, so they list like adjectives or important things or names for them, right, in a shape that is, relevant to them, and that's how they introduce each other. So that's word art. Of course, you can do it to brainstorm things about a reading or about a movie they watch, right, or anything like that. You can always use it in many different ways. Maps. So there's two sites related to maps that I really like. One is sifter.org. Sifter.org, I found this example, which I think is great for heritage language courses or Spanish in the US courses, which are to do paisajes lingüísticos, linguistic landscapes. So the learners can go around the community, and here I'm sure you have a lot more than we have in Champaign-Urbana. But they just go around the town, and their instructions is anytime they find a sign in Spanish, for example, this was in Spanish, take a picture of it with their phone, and then they mark it in the map where it is.
Oh.
And then they write a little something. So here says, otra casa al lado de la otra casa tiene, right? And they write a little description of where it was that they saw that sign.
This is what the student does, or this is already in there and they look at it?
No. This is an example that I found, but you would create yours. You enter your instructions. You tell the students, they can do it, they don't have to use their phone or app if they don't want to. You can also do it online. You basically add a pin, the picture, your caption, and save it. And it creates this sort of collaborative map where everybody's contributing to it. You don't have to do paisaje lingüístico if you want them to tag other things, like maybe it's like community resources, I don't know, whatever it is that you want the students to be tagging around the town. And then everybody in the class works on that, or you can have groups, right? And maybe different groups are tagging different things.
Yeah. Again, is it private? Can you make it private, or is it public, open to everyone?
That is a good question. I don't know. I don't want to say yes or no, definitely. I've only seen the public ones, and I haven't asked them. I haven't tried.
Is this through Sifter or through Google Source?
Sifter.
Okay.
Oh, that's Sifter. Okay.
Yeah. That is a good question. Sorry, I don't know if you could make it, if there's an option. There could be, and I just don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's Sifter, and then there's Google Tours, and I'll show you the Google tour that I created. which again, totally understand, depends on your learners. But if you have learners that are from other countries, or at least maybe connected to another country, or they know a lot about, like some of our students are from Oaxaca, right? Or it doesn't mean that they have lived there, but maybe they want to create a little tour knowing about that. ESL learners, we have a very international community, so they could sort of give a tour of their town. Or you could make it into a scavenger hunt of sorts, basically. So for example, here you see this little eye. If I click on it, I added, right, a little something. I added a little caption of information for the students, but you don't have to. You could perhaps add a question, right? So as they're going through the tour, they have to answer the questions that you have inserted around the tour. And then this one, I selected, what I created was a tour of places that were relevant to my childhood, to my youth. So instead of just the touristy places, you can find anything. So these are images available in Google. You type in any address, and Google has pictures of everybody. And so this is my neighborhood, so this is where I grew up. And so the student can move around, right? And so this is the entrance to the cemetery, right? And I put, this was just an example, right? Like obviously you don't have to make it this simple.
But everyone can see what you put. Like this is public.
Yes. This is my high school books library. Was
How
there?
did you get a picture of that? That was on Google?
This is on Google. Where I learned English. That's on Google too. Google has pictures of everybody.
So you don't mind that they know that the stuff about your childhood is on is public knowledge? Okay. No.
I mean, I'm not gonna, what are they gonna use against me that I learned English here? Probably
no,
not.
I agree. I just know that some people are very
private.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, again, I don't know right now if there is. It's a really good question. Can you change the settings? I'm not sure.
And this is through Google Tours.
Yes.
Google Tours is Google Tours, the VR. So they're virtual reality. Now they've also added explorations. I haven't played with that enough to tell you, but yeah.
So you found these pictures, this tour already
in here.
Google.
Yes.
And then you kind of curated it.
Yes.
Into your own tour.
Yep.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's going to let me go back to the home page. Let's try it.
Call Google Tour Builder or Tour Creator.
Since I'm not logged in, I'm not sure. I don't want to play around with it too much, but
it's a Tour Creator, right?
Yes.
Okay, because there's a Tour Builder.
Yes, and I always get them mixed. It's not,
I think it's a Tour Creator.
They're different.
It's a virtual reality.
Yes, that's it. But no, that's a good question, and it's there's two things. So one is the tour builder, and one is the tour creator. Why do they name it so similarly? I don't know.
What's the difference?
There's a difference. The tour creator is this, is the virtual reality. The tour builder looks like a map with different pins, and the students can move on from place to place, but it's more static. So you see a tour in a map. This is more of images, and you're exploring the images one by one, and you can tag them.
So this is part of Google Tours?
Yeah. It's called
Tour-
Google Tours Virtual Reality.
Yes. You have to get the virtual reality part, and it's this one that I'm showing you. The other one is just in a map. You create a tour.
Thank you.
But if you go to polygoogle.com, it'll take you to the virtual reality part?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm sorry. It's a different computer. I'm not logged in, and I'm just a little lost here. But
What was your question?
If you just go to poly.google.com, will it bring you to the virtual reality part?
No, there are two. So you have to
not for the building the tour.
Yeah.
No.
You have to do Google Tour Virtual Reality.
Yes.
And then you get the
yes.
HTTPS.
It didn't take me to the homepage where I created it. Sorry, I'm just not. not in my element with a different computer. But when you create it, I mean, I created it in minutes. It's not, I mean, I spent more time because I was enjoying finding pictures of my childhood places. But you could make it pretty simple. You type the address or you type the neighborhood, and Google finds these images that they have. The only thing to keep in mind is these are like street view pictures, and sometimes they change as they update, right? And so you have to make sure that you go in before you want to show it or share it, because some of the pictures may have changed. It doesn't happen all that often, but just like anything online.
Well, it's more about the linguistic sharing than
yes.
it's about the accuracy, isn't it?
Sure. Okay.
That's great.
In a similar vein, annotated media. Have you heard of ThingLink?
Yeah, people talk about ThingLink. I've never used it.
So ThingLink, you can annotate, meaning you can add little annotations to things like pictures. So it could be a screenshot, art piece, maps, or even videos. And the example that I have here. Oh, everything shut down. Okay, let's start again. The example that I have here is a painting. Hopefully it works. So this is one of the paintings that our learners analyze. It's by José Clemente Orozco. It's called El Demagogo. So for example, one of the things you can do is you can add a little video annotation link. And so we tell them, in order to analyze the painting, you have to know a little bit more about the artist. And then I have it linked to a YouTube video of a mini biography of his. Just to give you an example, you can just simply put a question. So they see exactly what is it that you want them to focus on, and you give them a question. Or you can do, let's say, la posición de las figuras. What is that saying? Where are they looking at? And there's a document, there's a PDF that helps learners how to interpret art, and it talks about different positions of figures within art and what they could mean. So then you can link to that, and the students can then have access to it. You can do it with, it doesn't have to be visual, it could be text, right? So if it's a screenshot of a poem and you want to annotate different parts, you could do that too. I like their number icon. There's many different icons and colors you can use. I do like their numbers, because then you could make it into something that students have to like answer or respond to each one, and then they submit to you, for example. Right. Okay. The students can create their own too, of course. I'm implying that it's a teacher, but obviously you can have the students annotate an image as well, or videos. Okay, so let's stop here a couple minutes. What do you think? And then you tell me. Did we like it? Sí. Muchísimo. Okay. All right, the last set of tools. This is where we get into more of the creative writing part. So one way of doing creative writing is with comic strips or graphic novels. Graphic novels look something like this. This is just an example of an outline. Comics is more like, right, where there's the bubbles and there's some kind of interaction and little story happening. Different tools that you can use. Usually best ones are Storyboard That. And these are both examples from Storyboard That. There's a lot of settings and characters, and I mean, there's a lot of variety. Free version is limited to just 6 vignettes, but sometimes that's enough for the learners. Make Believe Comics is entirely free, but it's a lot more simple, right? Just black and white kind of. No, some of them are color, but it's Make Believe Comics is very, very simple. And then Pixton is visually beautiful, but their free version is very limited, very limited. So if you have money and you want to use Pixton, great. So what can you do with this? I mean, you can have some teachers do things like, based on a story that they read, they create the graphic novel version of it. right? So for example, there are graphic novels based on El Lazarillo de Tormes. So obviously they don't have to do that, but they could create their graphic novel based on whatever other book you had them read, for example. You can do a little comic strip about, I don't know, some kind of interaction that they had, or whatever it is that you're, doing in class. Okay, other ways of doing creative writing. One thing I personally love, probably because I grew up in the 80s, is interactive fiction. I don't know if you've ever heard of Choose Your Own Adventure. Escoge tu propia aventura. That you read, right? A little story, and you had to choose where you would go next. And you went to different pages. Huh? Sí, en Argentina también. So I grew up reading all of those, and I always loved it. And guess where I was going to go next, and you had to know how many possible endings there were. And that's how, anyway. So one way you can do it, there are really fancy ways of doing this if you know programming, or if your students know programming. I don't, and I just don't really have the time to be learning about it. So
it's a whole other language.
It's a whole other language. So interactive fiction using Google Forms is one way that you can do it. So which is essentially in Google Forms, when somebody answers a question, you can set the logic to be like, if they answer this, go to this other page, right? And that's really how these stories work. This is an example in English where you see this story here. They added a nice pretty picture, and then you ring the bell to the left, or you ring the bell to the right. And where does that take you? So let's say you want to ring the bell to the right, and you click next, and then it takes you. You hear a voice, right? And you have this. You enter with enthusiasm.
But they have these in Spanish?
You create it, or the students create it. I'm having my students write them. So this is a creative writing project. So they write, you do it in steps. So the first thing that you need to do is have the students plan it. They can write it in groups. My students are doing it individually, but you could do it in groups, right? They need to plan their story out. That is important, right? So with bubbles and where are they going next, right? Where does this end here? This what happens next, and so forth. And then they need to actually write what's going on and the choices, and kind of in a Word document. Then you put it online. Don't start here, because you're gonna get lost and forget where was I going next. But if it's over the semester, right? This is a project that they do, and they put it online. My goal is to have enough so that then I can get other learners in other courses to read them and play around with them, right? So they are going to be in Google, and the students know it is going to be public for anybody to read and play around with it and select different choices and see where they end up.
Yeah. What level of students are creating those?
Right now, right now only my honors students are creating them as part of their honors projects, and their levels vary. I would probably say most of them are intermediate high. They need some help with language, but yeah. Oh, I wouldn't have a beginner learner do this, because this is not what they can do with the language yet. But advanced learners can do it. Again, do they need help? Yes, but this shouldn't be do this for tomorrow. This is a semester thing. They need drafts, they need feedback, they need revisions, right? And the other example that I have is to create picture books. So if they can create, so for example, they can create books for children in the community to read, or at least to make them available, and if somebody out there wants to use it and wants to read them and wants to use them in their class. And again, it could be language learners or just children who speak that language, using Story Jumper. And I have the example here. So you probably see this and go, oh my God, it's not free. So it is free to create it and to have it online.
But to read it
If you want to actually print it and they send you the printed copy to your house, yes, you have to pay. So things that you can do, you start here, right? So this person wrote about Christmas on the farm. Okay, very nice. And one thing you can do is you can have them actually add the audio as well. So as they're reading it,
'Twas Christmas Eve down on the farm, and the barnyard was all
Anyway, so they can have the audio and turn it almost into an audio book if you want to take it one step
Where
further.
do they get the graphics?
Oh, that's a good question. So in StoryJumper, you have to upload your own images. There are a lot of available images that are royalty free. You would have to, teachable moment, you would have to tell the students about copyright and which images they can use for free and which they cannot and so on. Pixabay, for example, is a great site that has a lot of images for free. So that's where they could get. Pixabay? That's for images, yeah. There's many others. What is it? Morgue? File Morgue? Unsplash? Beautiful images. Unsplash. Mm-hmm. Okay, and we're talking about language, we're talking about technology. I felt like I had to say something about translation and all of the sites that are out there for translation. If our students are, heritage learners, can they translate things? Yes, but I think it's good for them to discuss different translation sites out there and make translation part of the discussion too. There's a site called Lingui. Have you used Lingui? Yes, some of you know. So Lingui, basically you enter a phrase and Lingui gives you all of the sources where that is used plus the translation. So you see it in context. You can evaluate whether those sources are good translations or not, and then the many different ways in which that can be translated. I use it a lot myself when I'm looking for technical terms and I'm like, I'm not sure how you say that in Spanish. Or idiomatic expressions too.
It's always translate those literally and it sounds
so
super rare.
it's much richer than the traditional online translators that just give you one and that's it, right? Absolutely. So there's more of this analyzing and understanding the right one that you want to use. Word Reference has lots of forums where people are asking for how do you translate this, how do you translate that? So your heritage learners could participate in those. You can create sort of this blank account as not related to them, right? Or you can use it as class discussion, right? You don't have to have them participate. And we have to talk about Google Translate.
Oh gosh.
So Google Translate has gotten really, really good. Not perfect, but very good. So one thing, again, for fun, this is almost like the text readers. You can do is have the translate from one language to the next.
And then back.
And then back.
Yeah.
So then the translation back to the L1. And you can also compare professional translations. So for example, a lot of companies like T-Mobile, AT&T, Comcast have sites in Spanish and English, right? And those were made by professional translators. So you could take, the text and compare it and see if Google Translate matches that translation or not, whether it falls short, etc. And just for fun, I went to Google Translate and I entered who is a heritage speaker. Because I noticed from my students' papers that Google Translate doesn't know how to translate heritage speaker.
Oh, it's a tough one.
And it used to be much worse, but it has gotten better. So this is what I got. And this is much better. Do you know what it used to be? Probably 2 years ago. Parlante de patrimonio. Oh, no, altavoz. Altavoz de patrimonio.
Oh, altavoz.
So it has gotten much better, but still, un orador de la herencia would probably make you go, what? And when you go back, you ask it to translate again.
Who's the speaker of the inheritance?
Where's the money? I don't know. So you just to play around with it and make them understand translation a little bit. And then also fun to do in Google Translate is whether Google Translate is accepting lexical innovations, right? Such as troca. And troca it is, but raite is not. So raite, Google Translate doesn't quite know what to do with it. Can you give me a right? In Southern California, I lived in San Diego, and they said, "Me puedes dar un raite?" So they don't know what to do, but you can also see how it works with other loan words.
What is the term for that again? Lexicon?
Lexical innovations.
Lexical innovations.
Yeah. I was pleasantly
That's a nicer way than Spanglish.
Sure. I was pleasantly surprised that troca is accepted by Google Translate, no problem, and they understand it's truck. Okay. We're talking about words and definitions. We have in Moodle, in Blackboard, I don't think Canva has it, sadly, or Canvas. I was looking last night, and it looks like it's not a feature that they have yet, but you can request it, is to have a glossary. And this is something that the learners enter. That's why I blocked the name. So the learners enter the word, the synonym. We ask them to put an example, or not a synonym, but a definition, and a picture. And it can be searchable by category, date, author, by alphabet, etc. And so we build our dictionary in class. When they learn a new word in a reading, when they learn a new word in class, they have to go and enter it. It's worth, I think, only 10% of their grade, but that's part of what they do every week. They have to enter a new word. And that's there for everybody to see. So if somebody already entered this particular word, they cannot go in and enter the same one. You've got to enter a new one. And the system tells you that word is already there. Okay, last thing, I know. Last thing, I have a lot, sorry. Sites to explore. I don't know if you know about all of these, but I do want to at least make you aware of them, especially if you do a lot of social justice.
Yeah.
So kiva.org is where, and it's not just in Spanish, but they do have a Spanish version of it. So entrepreneurs around the world, and they tell you what the project is, their business is, and people can donate, right? And this is like crowdfunding. Immigrant experience, so these are interactive, they're in English, but they're from immigrants from all over the world, and you can read their story and then see where would you go next or what happened next. Radio Ambulante, it's all in Spanish. They have the transcripts, great, especially, yeah. And I think they're working on expanding more of the lessons, right? How can you use it in the classroom too? Nextvista.org, great site with videos, and these can be student-submitted videos. They have, for example, a whole section on global views, one on service learning. So if they do work in the community, at the end they can submit their project, and then other people know what the project entailed, what they did, etc. And every now and then they have contests for student videos. So this, maybe you want to enter that with your students. ClassHook is a site where you can more easily find videos. So for example, if I enter Spanish, it will show me all the video clips of TV shows and movies, right, that they have curated in their collection where that is relevant. So some of them, for example, are about certain characters trying to speak Spanish, or Lucy and Ricky learning Spanish, right? Everything is tagged and the video is there. So then maybe you can use it, as part of your class. In Coral, in Texas, they have a great list of resources of many different sites for heritage learners. Sorry, I am short on time. Okay, so the last thing I want to do today, if we have time, or not.
I think that we don't have that much
Okay.
time, but what we could do is that while I'll pass along the evaluation and the certificates, you can think about, whatever
Right.
project you want us
Yes.
to think, and then, we can organize some other, workshop in
It
the
sounds
future,
great.
and you already have the projects to work on, but I'll pass
That's
the...
a lot.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.